Okay, great. We'll just get started. So in the interest of starting on time and ending on time, I'm Tara Lodge. I'm the president of St. Matthew's Council. I first wanted to thank you all for being here for what is sure to be a really riveting conversation about constitutional changes. I also wanted to take a second to introduce any of our council members who are here. So Beth Schultz in the back, Pam Stokosisi, Laura Highland, and that is it, I think. I think Pastor Karen will be here soon as well.
Good.
So, okay, so anyway, so again, I'm Tara Lodge, President of Council. Thanks for being here. We'll get started. The first thing I want to do is just talk about the history of the St. Matthew's Council and our structure in the past, up until this year. Sorry?
Is it check close the doors?
I think so.
Yeah.
So, as prescribed in our Constitution, we have 12 members of the council, and plus our pastors are also voting members of council. The council, as well, has been very committee-focused and committee-driven, and that is also prescribed in our council. There is a set of committees listed: education, finance, human resources, partnerships. All of these are listed in our Constitution. And in the past, it has been a very retroactive activity each month where the committee chairs come to council and report on the activity of the prior month. So certain meetings were had, certain activities took place, but all very retroactive reporting. There wasn't a lot of time, when you think about how long that could take for 10 committees, there wasn't a lot of time to actually focus on being strategic and setting goals. So this is what has been happening for years. Now, I'm not sure if this has been happening for 40 years or 10 years, but this has been going on for quite some time. Any questions? So this year in 2022, we've had a few changes at St. Matthew's, you may have noticed. And we took the opportunity to sort of reimagine and reevaluate what council's purpose, our structure, how we were going to operate, and is the way that we were operating really the best for St. Matthew's going forward. So Pastor Karen brought us all a book called Inside the Large Congregation. It's by Susan Beaumont. It's been very fascinating to read and learn more about church structure. It's really a guidebook on how staff, pastors, council can interact with each other and what are best practices in many communities and many churches throughout, I think, the country. But what we learned after reading these chapters, also, I should add that staff has also been reading this book, correct? So we have all been learning a lot through this. What we learned on the council chapter is she advises that we have 3 focuses on council. The first is fiduciary, so making sure that the church is solvent, that we're using our money in an appropriate way in our gifts that we've been given. The second would be strategic, and in using this, we would be setting mission and vision, setting what our core values are. You may remember that we did a lot of this in some of the visioning work that we did with John Holm 2 years ago. But council considers all of that, and we want to make sure that we are acting in a very strategic manner rather than focusing on programmatic and very the minutia of what is happening within the church. Lastly, the other focus should be generative. I struggle with the word generative. In the business world, you might say ideation. I also would say maybe spitballing, like coming up with ideas, talking through what's happening, where do we want to go, just coming up with thoughts. Yes, please.
And the easiest way I say is how we catch what is God up to. Just trying to catch the work of the Spirit. And that just takes a lot of more listening and thinking, and it's slow. But we always want to kind of pay attention, right, that God is leading this church.
So those are what Susan Beaumont recommends are the 3 focuses of council. So as I said, in the past, it's been very committee focused. What is happening in each little area of ministry within the church? Now we're trying to shift to be thinking more strategically, and where are we going on the whole? Where is our mission leading us?
And Tara, I would mention too, in committee meetings, some of this it's always been done. We're just trying to expand the breadth of what council's doing by taking away the iterative reporting. So it's not to say that there's been no fiduciary oversight, or there's been no governance, or these things are happening, but by these shifts we're talking about would allow more time and space, that you're not spending the last half an hour at 10 p.m. on this stuff for all the other things that were happening. So I want to give at least credence that it's happened. We just want to do more of it.
Thank you. Another recommendation that Susan Beaumont makes in her book is that we have just 2 standing committees on council. And if necessary, we create other ad hoc ones. But the first would be a finance committee, which has always been in existence, and an HR committee, which also has. So make those the only 2 standing committees, and then any other of that information of all those other committees is handled with the staff and the program directors. Lastly, so any questions on that, 2 standing committees? Ad hoc committees could be something like 100th anniversary, might be another one that council needs to pay attention to when that was going on, but those can come and go, but these are the 2 main that will stay. Questions?
Are you asking for comments?
Sure.
Are you asking for comments?
Sure.
It seems to me that without more specific committees, as individual things come up, replacement of a personnel or some special program or whatever, that a problem with whatever, that it will just flow to either the pastor or the council president, that without a committee that's always there in place, there's going to be a huge burden put on a couple of people.
So the committees technically will stay active and stay in place, but they will not be reporting to council every month. So for example, there might still be a worship and music committee, and they might meet, but there isn't they might be with John, and John and Pastor Karen might be meeting until there's an issue, and hopefully there aren't. But if there is an issue, then Pastor Karen would potentially bring that issue to council. So it's just that they wouldn't be reporting in every month.
I did not understand that. I thought that the committees themselves would disappear.
No.
It's just really the.
Yes. It's just the
monthly
reporting, yes.
If they're existing committees, they got reassigned to a staff member. So that the idea is council's over here and staff are kind of overseeing daily operations, if you will. And certainly there are also lay leaders in those committees, and that part of it still exists, but it's just kind of over there in the staff management. So like Al's nodding, he's working with Ed Bross, is still chair of the property committee, and now Ed is the staff member that supports that work of that committee, for example.
Good. So then the last point that we took from Susan Beaumont's book is that her recommendation is that council size be between 5 and 7. And as you remember, currently it's at 12. Her recommendation is that it becomes pretty difficult to be effective at decision making when you have an overburdened council size. 12 is a lot. It's hard we come to decisions, but there's a lot of it's more effective to have a smaller group. So what I want to go on to is sort of what we have done this year so far to implement and how we came to some final decisions. So as we just talked about, we reduced the council committees to just finance and human resources. The former committee oversight, as Pastor Karen mentioned, moves from council chairs reporting in every month, that is moved down to staff and the pastors. Those committee chairs can remain on those committees, obviously, but they do not report in every month as they had been. And we're trying to empower staff and pastors to run those groups and manage that process.
One of the other nice advantages is that you can chair a committee or serve on a committee, and there's more places to be involved, and it's not such a big role of running a committee and serving on the board. And so you're large enough to be able to split those volunteer positions, because you'll find you have people that are gifted doers and want to just get in there and or go to the committee meeting and do the work. And then you have other people that had that kind of fiduciary, strategic, visionary abilities that would be good council members. And so you're kind of recognizing the giftedness, and that's actually a kind of a nice thing of a larger community, is that you're going to have more people to potentially engage in ministry.
And we had a lot of conversation about how do we make this shift. I think everybody's worried, how are we going to know on council that everything's going okay? And I think it's just a mindset shift of council is here for strategic leadership, and the staff and pastors are there for strategic management and making sure that those are going okay. And if issues come, if issues arrive, they will come to council with those. So just a bit of a mindset shift. Last
question.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
So how are the committees to know which staff they're underneath, or their leader is?
I don't know if you want to talk to that.
Hopefully we've reached out to you. Who's your staff member that's joined your committee?
You, I guess.
That's me, yes.
Okay. It would be, just kind of good to know who each one is.
Yeah, we could, spell that out a little bit more, or publish that at some point. Okay, that's a good idea. Yes.
Is that more of a burden to the staff than what has been? I mean, you're talking about staff, the office, and the pastors? Is that what you mean by staff?
Staff, and most of them have been involved in these committees already.
But the program staff as well as the office staff, so Gretchen, right, and John.
Oh, okay.
Right, so, not just,
Education.
Oh, I'm
yes,
sorry,
yeah, so it's a broader group of staff that are more involved with the committees.
Okay, I just didn't want to be a burden.
Of course, absolutely.
And I think for me in the conversation was to begin talking about it, it was, I think the church was already functioning in that way, that and you don't always have active committees, but the ones you did have were already working pretty closely, like the youth and families, education, we're already working very closely with Gretchen. And so it's just natural that you empower her with oversight of the direction of that ministry and not a committee chairperson. It's a partnership, of course, but that would move forward. But I would see like evangelism and fellowship, it would be one or two people, but they were already working very closely with Sue Swing to kind of think of things. And so you were already kind of functioning that way, and we're kind of just owning it to some degree and blessing it, if you will.
I have a question too. Would this allow then those committees to be more of like long-term standing committees, and you're not necessarily seeing the
Churn of the council.
intentional turnover and all of that, so that there is more continuity in what they're doing as committees?
Absolutely. Anybody else? Any other comments? Okay, then lastly, we've shifted in moving the committees off, the committee reporting away from council. We've shifted the focus of our meetings. So we have a good amount of focus on finance, which we've always had, but also on metrics. What is happening with attendance? Who's coming to worship? How many people? Who's engaging with the emails that we send out every week? How many people are actually reading them? How many people are clicking to register for something on our St. Matthew's website? How many people are coming to Sunday school? All of those things, we're reviewing that to see where we're headed and where we're recovering since COVID. We're also focusing on HR, which has always been part of our meetings. But we're also taking time to work on strategy and planning. So things like setting goals. We talked earlier this year about what did council feel was very important? Engagement was the biggest response. We needed to re-engage with everybody. So we set some goals that we wanted to achieve 75% attendance, 75% of pre-pandemic attendance levels by the time October rolled around, and we're just about there. council charge staff with that.
Yeah, and that's the part I
Yes.
liked, that, you know, they said, that's our goal, and we're gonna stay out of how it's gonna get accomplished, and now we're putting that on the staff to figure out how you're going to promote, build programs back up, and then they just watched the metrics and said, is our staff doing what we're asking them to?
And that's where, you know, the weekly gatherings in the parking lot in the summer were real popular. And that was all part of engagement and getting people to come back to church and get to know each other. Determining initiatives, what are we going to be focusing on? Do we need to do some internal work, as well as what are the initiatives that came out of our visioning? What do we want to work on? And then planning, of course. So talking about next year, what is our focus going to be there? What things do we need to set up for that? So this has been going on for months, and I feel like we're starting to come into our own. We're feeling a good flow, ebb and flow. Yeah, so any questions on that? So the next big change that we had learned, or suggestion that we had gotten from Susan Beaumont's book, was talking about changing the council size. Now her recommendation was 5 to 7. We heard that and thought, wow, okay, that's quite a shift. But what we did was we talked about a lot of it internally, and then we decided to seek out counsel from some of the other pastors and congregations in the area. And what do they see in other churches, and what did they experience? So Pastor John Holm, as you remember, was part of our visioning process. He has a lot of experience with a lot of churches, and he agreed. He said 7 is a really very good number. He thinks 5 is too small, but 7 he feels is very good. It gives everybody an opportunity to do work, and everybody has to be plugged in and engaged. We also, Pastor Karen talked with a few people. There's a pastor at Martin Luther Church, and then also Pastor Matt Short he's on Synod staff. He had comments as well and agreed that this is a pretty common constitutional change to sort of right-size your council to be effective at decision-making. And yeah, so we debated it. We really felt good that there are a lot of other congregations that are moving to this model. Since we have initiated this conversation, I've been paying attention to board sizes. And for example, I saw at the Wauwatosa School District, at the school board, they have 7 people, and they're managing thousands and thousands of children, and families and people in the community. So I thought, okay, well 7 feels good for us, and we're nowhere near that size. What we came to is that we would approve, council decided 7 members, or 8, depending on the number of pastors we have, with an effort being made to keep it at an odd number for voting purposes. So we're not in a stalemate situation. I can't believe we would ever, but we need to plan for any possibility. Any questions about that?
So then beyond the standing committees that were mentioned, are the others at-large committee members, or how is that defined? You had the finance and HR,
Yep,
the
so
standing
then-
committees.
Right, so you have 2 people on council who are those chairs for those 2
Mhm.
committees. Yes, everybody else would be at large. There would be a president, vice president, secretary,
Okay.
which is considered the executive committee, as is the treasurer, but the treasurer is not a voting member of council. So in talking about those 7 members of council, 3 of those would be executive committee members, and then you would still have 4 that are not executive committee members. So you will have some people, different perspectives, different viewpoints. And then you will still also have 2 pastors in today's scenario. So that's still 9 people that are reviewing the focus of the church, reviewing and maintaining direction, watching what's going on. So we're moving from essentially 14 to 9. Questions, concerns, thoughts?
Is all of this, an ELCA movement towards this, or is this unique for our church, or?
Many of the pastors that we talked with said this is very common, it's a common constitutional change.
Okay.
It's not driven by the ELCA.
No,
This is us making the
Decisions,
decision, but
okay.
in talking with the Senate staff, to Tara's point, it's very common.
Sure,
Yeah.
okay.
So in summary, we have a pretty chart here. What were the prior, the current state, and what is the proposed future state? So.
Right now, the way it works, we get, every year we get 4. It's rotating, 4, 4, 4. How do we see us going from 12 to 7
Yes.
in the voting, that we still have a rotation?
Yes, that's a great question. So I think this year might be an anomaly where we might only have 1. Some people have, and we're still in the process of figuring out the exact logistics of getting to 7.
Okay.
But we have some people that are stepping down from council. We have some people that have volunteered to step away from their term in order to help us get to that 7.
Okay.
So we are still working through all of those logistics. But I think where we wind up is like this year we might have just 1, and then the following year would be 2 or 3 people re-upping. So clearly it won't be 4 every year, but
Right,
it'll just
right,
be a
right.
couple
Okay.
coming on. But this year might just be an anomaly, like,
Understood.
yeah.
Thank you.
So.
So it would be staggered then?
Yes, it would be, because there are people that are still continuing their current term into that, so when their current term ends, maybe in 2 years, then those 2 people would roll off, and then the next people, maybe there would be 3 that would be rolling off, so.
So what's the decision then, as long as it's not, people that are on committees, who is going to be taking those council?
So some people have self-selected to not continue their term after this year. So for example, I will be rolling off, this is the end of my 3-year term, so I will be rolling off. There are a few others, another person has said, oh, I can roll off, this isn't my calling. My calling is to do the actual committee work, I don't need to be on
Yeah,
council.
but then, when that cycle finishes, who,
In 24.
So how
are you gonna get
so-
new people
So the,
cycled in?
Sure,
You know,
yeah,
because
absolutely.
is what I'm saying, you
You
know.
bet. So it would
It's not an
still-
automatic.
right, so it would still be the same process. In our constitution, the executive committee is the nominating committee, I believe, for council members. So that committee would still work to recruit members for council.
So
But
instead
that's
of-
more of a strategic, instead of looking for someone who's gonna be serving on fellowship as a chair and wants to, then you're also going to be on council. You're looking for, now we're gonna be looking for people who wanna do fellowship as a committee and work there. And then for council positions, look for people that are interested in the strategic and fiduciary nature of the church. And it could be that they also might chair a committee somewhere, but we're not tying the seats on council to the chairs of committees. So it's gonna be a similar recruitment process, but we actually can be looking for what the council needs, not looking at like, well, I really like to do fellowship events, okay, I'll chair it, which also means I have to serve on council, okay. Now you're looking at what, like the executive committee and others will be, pastors will be looking for people to fill those 2 types of roles. Does that make sense? So I'm looking for people that have a strategic or growth mindset, or like want to be on a council that's looking at these more governance areas. And then looking to fill, I mean, you still have to fill committees, but that'll be more, I guess, not as executive committee anymore.
Right.
Does that,
Did that answer your question, or not really? Like the committee, the people who are working on committees currently are not going away from council necessarily. They just don't have to report in each month on that committee. Does that make sense? So they're not leaving council necessarily right now. Did that answer your question?
Instead of getting 4 people every year to fill empty spots, now they may only just get 2 or 3. So the process is gonna be the same, it's just we don't need 4, we'll just be 2 or 3.
So will the whole congregation vote on these changes, and then will it happen maybe in 24 that the council will be down to 7?
That's a great question. Perfect segue, thank you. I planned. So, you all have a handout that lists what the constitutional changes are, the proposed amendments. I think on that first page you'll see is the first constitutional change of moving from from 12 to 7 to 8. And this constitutional amendment will be first voted on at the special meeting on November 13th that has been called. So constitutional amendments need approval vote at one meeting, and then a ratified vote at another meeting 30 days later, or something like that. So that will not, the ratification will not happen until January 29th at the annual meeting, but it will be voted on then as well.
Okay.
So that is the first change there. Next, we have bylaw changes, which is on your second page.
Well, and just on the first page, it's purely editorial, but since we were fixing the Constitution or opening it up. We don't use the word senior pastor elsewhere in the Constitution, so the senior to lead has no substantive effect on what's happening. It's purely editorial, so that we're consistent throughout the Constitution, that we speak of the lead pastor, so.
So on the second page, these are amendments to the bylaws. Now, bylaws only need to be ratified. So we will not be doing these, they only need to be ratified at one meeting. So we will be voting on these at the annual meeting in January. So these changes are reflecting our mission statement that had changed back when we were doing the visioning with John Holm. It had been edited down a little bit. We are making an addition to a clarification on why 7 to 8 members on council, making an effort to have an odd number when considered with pastors. We have section 13, which is the standing committees language, and how the council works with committees. So those are the bylaw changes. So these will only be voted on in January. And then if you go, oh, sorry. Yes.
Who are the deacons?
I don't believe we have any deacons.
Okay.
I don't know if we've ever had any deacons. I don't know.
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah. Okay. But these are, the Constitution comes from the Synod.
Mhm.
So I think some of the language is sort of across the board we have to have.
Yeah, so some of the churches may.
They might, yes, exactly. And then lastly, the Synod has changes to the Constitution that we must accept. And those are the required updates. We have a separate handout of those. I only have a few copies of that, but it's a slew of them, and the majority of those updates are for inclusive language and some contextual things that they needed to have changed. We have no decision on that. We have to take them, and they're part of our Constitution. Non-required updates are this third page, and these are things that council discussed and decided whether to include them or not. And the first one is about how you can do voting not in person. And then 1009 was ex officio, and meaning that they can vote. 1205, financial, who's in charge of financial and property matters. And same thing, 1213 is the same as 1008. So all of these should be pretty just basic pass through. So therefore concludes my presentation. What questions do you have? Thoughts, comments, concerns? Okay, well,
Good job.
thank you. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or call me. I don't have it on any paper right now, but Sonia would know where to get me.
Vote on the 13th.
Yes, please come to the meeting on the 13th. It'll be between services, and we'll be voting, so. Okay, yes.
It's not a question, I'm just wondering, do you want clarification on the word deacon? On the office of deacon?
If you would like clarification.
I can speak privately.
Okay.
The church is the ELCA is realizing that there is a shortage of pastors. And I was commissioned in 1989 as under the LCA as a certified lay professional. That included, study and work. I was never under call because at that point people couldn't, or churches where I was living could not afford a paid position of the constraints with insurance and pension and all that. Then when the ELCA was formed, that position was renamed AIM, Associate in Ministry. I was one of the first women to be certified. Then lately, with the shortage of pastors, that position has been renamed to Deacon of Word and Service, which is what I'm titled now. And we are rostered under the synod to which you belong. I am at this time, well, I will always be rostered under the Northern Illinois Synod, because that is where I was commissioned. It's a way for churches to employ, well, first of all, it's a way to certify, give credence to Martin Luther's position of the purpose of lay is to spread the word, that we are all spreading the word of God. And it's a position to further that. And many churches are employing deacons of word and service. And then in pastoral shortages, the bishop of that synod where the church is can give permission for that person to administer the sacraments in a specialized situation when a pastor is not available to consecrate the elements or administer the sacraments. So it is a position in the ELCA. And I'm proud to be a deacon.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Okay. All done. Thank you.
Thank you very much.